Commence primary ignition.
Today we're taking a look at episode 5 of Andor, The Axe Forgets. Let's get going. This episode opens on Coruscant with Cyril and his mother back in their apartment. From this conversation we get that Cyril's mom is very overbearing and seriously critical of him. There's also blue milk. We get some blue milk in his cereal, as well as some spacey looking fruit that we know from Earth here. His mother mentions desperate times and also mentions a favor they can call in from an Uncle Harlow. Now, I don't know who they're mentioning. Leave a comment below what you think and who this uncle is, because they are mentioned later as coming through on this favor. Next we open on to Aldhani. They are prepping for the raid, our group of rebels, and Cassian wakes up alone to find his stuff is missing. He goes outside and finds that Skeen, the older member of their crew, is tearing through his stuff and has neatly placed it all out, searching through it. We're able to see what's in Cassian's bag. He has his Briar pistol, which we talked about. He also has a Corpo pistol, which is obviously from one of the officers he killed, and a bunch of credits there strewn out. Now, Skeen asks about the Corpo pistol, because it does seem conspicuous. We also learn a lot about Skeen. He has these tattoos on his chest and his arm that tell us a lot about this character. The tattoo on his chest has Imperial markings and denotes an Imperial detention center. So he is literally a barcode tattooed in on him. He was a serious Imperial prisoner. We're not sure for how long, but in a seriously bad place. He also has a tattoo on his inner arm that Cassian recognizes as By the Hand. This must also be a rebel group or some kind of insurgent group. Maybe that's what ended him up into the detention center, but they potentially could be two separate things. I believe they're two separate things. One led into the other. Detention center into his joining this movement and then the rebels. It is pretty interesting that Cassian knows both of these places, whereas he grew up in a similar environment and is of a similar kin. We also get the meaning of the title of this episode, which is The Axe Forgets. The end of this phrase, Skeen explains, is, "But the tree remembers." This is a wonderful phrase in the rebellious nature of rising up against an oppressor. We also get a little breakdown of the crew. We learn what we already know about Nemik, that he's a true believer, writing his own little manifesto and really in it for the cause. After this scene, we return back to Coruscant, this time with Mon Mothma and her family. We're first introduced to Mon Mothma's daughter, and there is a seriously uncomfortable exchange between the two parents and this daughter. This is just I don't know how to explain it, but they're pretty much setting up the rift in this family. We are getting a great setup to the Mon Mothma character and why she's able to fully invest herself in the rebellion. Returning back to Aldhani, we get a really great conversation between Nemik and Cassian, where Nemik brings over this old technology navigator. Now, very analog, very programmable, very old school, Cassian remarks. But this is kind of the essence of the rebellion, the early rebellion for sure, but then the growing rebellion of old that we know in the Galactic Civil War, which is using older school tech things you can customize, you can know how to repair, you can really know better than Imperial technology. So which is newer technology, shinier technology, which is not always often as good as the older stuff. So it's just finding these loopholes in technology, exploiting them for your benefit and for the benefit of knowledge, truth, and freedom for all those around. You can tell that he's an idealist who's writing a manifesto. He really goes into this list of things that are forgotten, that once the Imperials take over, they do. And they teach you how to forget things, to depend on them. And once again, this is Colonizer 101. This ability to gain technological freedom is more than metaphoric, Nemik exclaims. It's a freedom for all the galaxy of truth and the ability to spread that. I think one of the most fantastic quotes he has here, and it does feel like it's straight out of the manifesto, is, "The pace of oppression outstrips our ability to understand it." I think his most interesting point of note is that elemental rights will be fought for. And this is not only resources, but he refers to knowledge as an elemental right. And that's really what he's fighting for. And man, is he truthful, and man, does it feel like it's coming from the heart, because it is. Nemec idealizes systems of truth, navigating to clean, achievable outcomes. His manifesto is so similar to the analog navigating machine because they're both guiding people to freedom, and man, is that a beautiful comparison. And how could I forget, we get a new type of colored sustainable milk in the Star Wars universe. This is drag milk. It looked a little bit orange. It's what they were sipping around the campsite. It's probably from one of those goat-looking creatures, and it's really sustainable and all you need to live off of, but ooh, it doesn't look good. Neat that we're having another kind of milk, and I'm glad that this one is particularly gross. Cassian is called in to talk with Tamarin and Val, where he learns that they don't actually know how to set up the flying shipping container to launch. He's surprised when he finds out that he's the only one in the group that knows how to launch this, and very, very shocked that without him, this job probably would have blown up in their faces. Luckily, Cassian does know, and they're able to go through with the plan. Now, I know I talked a lot about somebody betraying somebody, there being some kind of sabotage, something going wrong in this heist. And we're getting a lot of Lieutenant Gorn giving orders, being very imperial, marching around the sites that we are seeing on the little diagram, but in real life. And we're led to believe that he might be a true Imperial. Now, at this point, we haven't heard his entire story, but later in the episode, we do get his entire story. But even after that, there is this uncertainty as to if he's on our side or not. On Aldhani, during March training, it's shown that Cassian has much more knowledge of battle tactics and also what an Imperial regiment would look like when marching. They make these changes, but it's very, very clear that this raid needed Cassian's knowledge, needed a lot of help, and really would have failed without him. In this conversation, Cassian also reveals that he's been observing them also and has learned a lot about them too. And then, to break up the conversation, wham, we get a TIE fighter flyover. Now this is really beautiful. It's one of the second times we've seen a TIE fighter on screen with this show. And man, it zips by in a really impending kind of like, kind of way. And we get the best quote pre-rebellion from Nemec here, which is, "A surprise from above is not as shocking as one from below." And this is perfectly setting up the raid they're about to do. So there's an interesting scene by the Roto Hauler in the room by the launch pad where they're going to eventually escape with all this money. And this is right next to the vault where we do see all the credits, the whole credits they're about to make. But Gorn makes an interesting decision to, what it seems like, try to put more men in that room. He asks them to have more men on paint detail. The officers say, "We'd like to be above," and he's like, "Okay." But it seems like he was trying to get more men in that room. I could be wrong. I could be absolutely wrong, because we immediately learn also about the reason why Gorn is in the rebel fight. Now, we learn that he fell in love with a woman from the planet, the woman got killed somehow, and he decided to join. So I am suspicious of him, just like Cassian is. We get a brief but important scene of Blevin overseeing the Imperial takeover on our industrial world of Ferrix. Now we see the Imperial brass setting up at a hotel, and Blevin's commander on Ferrix asking for the title of prefect. Now this feels not important now, but it gains some gravity later in the story when we learn more about our characters. Deirdre Mira and her officer, they're going over more documents and trying to figure out what strategy they're going to move forward on. Now her officer reassures her that there is a pattern, there is something to follow, and we get a few important name drops. Kessel and Fondor. Now Kessel, we know from the Kessel Run, is important to the Imperials because it produces a really, really important hyperspace fuel. Fondor is a manufacturing world that builds ship parts and builds parts of ships. These are all really important to the Imperial cause. We also hear of a transponder that's stolen from Jakku, and proton warheads stolen from Base K. Now these are other guerrilla operations that we've seen in the Rebels shows of different cells making these strikes, and this is the other side of the coin where we're seeing the Imperial Intelligence Network putting these together and believing that it is the growing of an incoming rebellion. Deirdre Mira is pouring through these documents, and she's aided by her assistant saying that these are too random to be random. It really proves the ISB mentality, and her quote specifically of saying, "You'd never climb the same fence twice if you were trying to be a spy network." We do see her taking some kind of pill, which I can only believe is some kind of imperial speed. Now, the Nazis did this too to keep their people going when they were on their fervor and fully drank the Kool-Aid, and the ISB and Deirdre Mira is a perfect example of this. I think this is interesting. This has always been hinted at, but it's cool that we're seeing it for the first time live action in the Star Wars universe. We're back to Eldani when they're leaving the camp and getting ready for the raid. This model they've gone over to plan the raid, they burn it in the fire, destroying all evidence, and they all have a drink around the fire and a cheers to the rebellion. This is a really important moment. This is the start of their raid, essentially. They've really begun. It's here where we learn about Lieutenant Gorn, his backstory, and we learn that everyone has their own rebellion. While marching toward their next raid location, Skeen pulls a knife on Andor and gets his Kyber crystal. He sees this as just a mark of, obviously this guy's a traitor. Why would he be taking a vast amount of money into this raid that we're about to do? It's a really intense moment. Cassian almost pulls his pistol on Skeen, and then Tamarin also almost pulls his pistol on Cassian. This scene perfectly demonstrates the distrust between everyone and the fact that every one of these people is on edge the night before this raid they're about to do. Cassian, again, has the most clear head in this moment and demonstrates the most experience in a life or death situation. He expresses to everyone in a really powerful statement the difference between fear versus losing your nerve. So he exclaims that either we're going to do this or we're not going to do this, but you're not going to blame it on me. I kind of like this mentality, and it really does show the toughness of Cassian himself. It's at this next campsite this night before that we learn the story of Skeen's family. Now, Skeen does this as an apology, and this is just a very machismo rebel kind of way of apologizing, is explaining your story and why you're in the fight. We learn that Skeen's brother was killed by the Imperials, his land was taken over, he used to be a farmer, by a prefect who just wanted to take over the land. This is hitting especially hard because this title of prefect was the exact title that the Imperial commander that was working for Blevin was pining over and just wanting. This demonstrates just the callousness of what these commanders can do when they have full power over their regions. We also get another scene of Mon Mothma, of just her having a really, really intense discussion with her family again. This is sowing seeds for her future ability to join the rebellion, and we get some name drops of some other organization that she has started, but as we know is probably a front for something in the future Rebel Alliance. We end this episode back on Coruscant with Luthen. He's either in his apartment or at the gallery where he's checking a transponder, and his assistant comes in to make sure that he stops and reassures him that he's done everything he could. The ball is now rolling to its next location, and it is securely out of his hands. This is meant to be reassuring, but it's also, in truth, they don't know what the outcome's going to be, and Luthen exclaims that even though he was good with making sure that nobody could be backtracked back to him, he was a little bit reckless with Andor and Vel originally. Now this gives us more backstory potentially into him and Vel having a deeper relationship as some kind of friendship or something in the past, but this also demonstrates how vulnerable Luthen knows he is and how nervous he is about the outcome of this raid. Luthen's assistant reassures him that it was never going to be perfect, and it's either going to be all over tomorrow or just started. I kind of appreciate this because it's either going to stay under the covers or they're going to be in full rebellion together and with the cells they've started. Another fantastic episode. We had a different director It felt like a different feel, like a very dramatic spy thriller, like it's always been, but they're really gearing up for the actual raid, which is going to be the entirety of next episode. Leave a comment below. What do you think of the series? Who do you think is the traitor? Where do you think they're going to run into some trouble? But I think it's been a wonderful show so far, and this episode particularly gave us some seriously deeper character development in the rebel cell that Andor's with. Thanks for watching another episode of Binary Sunset Review. As always, I've been Mike. Your likes and your views are greatly appreciated. Have a great day out there. Stay safe, stay sane, and remember, the Force will be with you. Always.
I'm just a simple man trying to make my way in the universe.